What's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. On this episode, we are continuing on our F100 build. We got the truck into the clean room. Last episode, we put the Supercharger on. This truck should put down some serious power. But in order to get that down the road, we have to finish out electrical. Our master cylinder is going to get bolted up to our firewall. We're also going to link up the steering and also put in the battery on the frame rail underneath the passenger side of the truck. We're going to be putting in the power steering system, which is going to be full electric. Now, there's a lot of work still to do, so let's get to work. All right, so Andrew's been diving deep into the brakes. We have our master cylinder from Willwood that we mounted up on the firewall.
We have each individual front caliper plumbed into the front of the master cylinder. So we're gonna also put a brake proportioning valve in the rear line so we can dial in the brake pressure for the rear.
I like how you routed those lines. They look really good against that firewall. If you guys want to have a quick refresher on how to bend brake lines, go ahead and click the link below and we're gonna put a link to our brake line episode. So we have one fitting we have to throw on there so that we can finish this all out. We do have some clamps down there to keep the lines all nice and tidy because we like tidy and engine bays. Everything looks a lot nicer. So what we're gonna do now, guys, we're gonna move on to the sway bar. So this just came in a nail from Heidts. It comes with all of the brackets for us to put everything in. Our frame rail is already notched, but we do have to punch some holes. So we're gonna get this thing over the truck, start lining everything up, getting all these brackets out of the packaging and see what we got going on. When you have independent front suspension, it's really, really crucial that you run a sway bar because without the sway bar, the front end is gonna be really, really washy. This is gonna tie both front driver and passenger side lower control arms together to give the truck way more stability. It's gonna stop that huge amount of body roll that happens when you're not running a sway bar. So our brackets are installed. All we had to do was use a factory bolt hole on the front side of the rail here. We already notched the frame rail. We had to drill 1, 2, 3 holes. Now this angle piece is gonna hold the sway bar bushing mount. This gets bolted in here, gets repurposed with those 2 bolts that are holding this bracket in. And then what we do is we have these end caps here that will actually hold the sway bar into position and stop it from sliding back and forth. Because if it slides back and forth, then you're gonna have issues with the sway bar actually engaging and like locking up. The only other thing we have to do is put the Heim joint on either side on the lower control arms and install the whole thing all together on the ground and just bolt it up. We still have to paint some pieces. We obviously have to paint the sway bar black, but we're gonna fit everything in first, then take it all apart, paint it, and then put it all back in. We have our battery here. This is made by Braille. This is their lightweight 21-pound unit, but it's got 1380 cold cranking amps in this tiny little battery right here. Braille makes this nice bracket to be able to mount your battery wherever you want, but for ease of simplicity, we decided to put a hook on the top of the bracket so to be able to pretty much just latch onto the frame rail like that. So it just makes it easier to get in and out since the battery is going to go underneath the cab. We're gonna go ahead and throw the battery inside the bracket, put it up in the cab, and use 6 bolts on either side in order to bolt it down. Battery is in. Pretty happy with that spot. The battery box is not lower than the cab, so we're okay there. We have our cables already run, so you can kind of see what we're gonna do with here. So we're gonna come up the frame rail on the back side and then screw into the top of the battery. There'll be a tender that comes down, make it so that he can trickle charge it when it's just kind of sitting and chilling in his collection. But for now, battery box is all set. Now we can pass it on to Mike. He can install the distribution block for the power so we can power up the rest of the chassis and all the accessories needed in the truck. Got our distribution block on the other side over here. Boom. Now we're able to go ahead and run all our power wires to this block. See Andrew's feet. Hello. Do the happy dance. Yay. All right, guys, so the wiring harness for the 50 Coyote is all set. Mikey just got done cleaning this all up. So this split loom gives it that nice mil-spec harness look. When we go to install this on the truck, it's not gonna be like a big eyesore like it is on other harnesses. If you look into like some late model stuff, especially the Coyote, there's a ton of wiring that makes this engine go compared to like an LS. So we wanted the wiring to be as little as possible. We're tucking a lot of it under here. A lot of it's gonna be tucked up away. The computer will be inside of this fender well right here, because this is kind of the last piece of the puzzle before we can start buttoning up the front end of the truck and just getting all the engine compartments in. This is more of like a factory location. So now just this wiring harness kind of just dips underneath the wheel well. All right, now that we have our ECU installed in our wheel well and our wiring's all set, we're gonna go ahead and get over to the power steering system and install the pump and get the lines made. Any of you doing a Coyote swap, you're gonna run into an issue. Right here is where a power steering pump would be. Well, on the Coyotes, especially out of the F150, which we sourced this motor from, it has an electric steering rack. So we did the Heidts IFS system and it's hydraulic. So in order to get around this situation with the Whipple supercharger, with the pulleys and all that, it's not really allowing us to bolt up a power steering pump to the motor. What we've come up with is this electric power steering pump from a 2004 Mini Cooper. We're gonna plasma cut a bracket to mount this to the frame rail. We have our port here for power steering fluid to come in, and our high pressure side here, and then a return will go back to the rack. So we're gonna go ahead and mount this guy probably right down here. This nice big hole. Mount it right to the frame rail. Our feed line will come through here, and then have a nice billet can up here where we'll be able to put our fluid in. All right, now that this bracket's all set, we're gonna head over to Andrew and see how the wiring's getting done so we can get this power steering pump installed.
We don't have the Mini Cooper wiring harness connectors that come with this pump. So what I'm gonna do is terminate some ends onto these wires and then epoxy them into this connector, and then put a Deutsch style connector on the end of this, and that'll be utilized to the rest of the harness on the chassis side. And then I'm also gonna have to do one for the power and the ground feed, and those are gonna be a 6 gauge with a spade, and I'm gonna do the same epoxy potting in this one as well. Now we're just gonna let them dry, and then we're gonna go ahead and install the power steering pump onto the frame with the mount that Tim made for us. Alright, so I just finished making up this -10 hose that we're using for the suction side of the power steering pump. This is gonna run from our fill point. It's got a 45 AN fitting down to the pump. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that installed.
While Andrew's finishing up the pump over there, what I'm gonna do is go ahead and finalize this 2-piece drive shaft. I wanna get my point fixed down there so I know my drive shaft line is perfectly straight. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw some bolts in. I'm not gonna completely tighten it up. And then I'm gonna jack up this, see what I have to do to make a plate for this cross member on the cab to bolt the drive shaft bearing to. Now we have to get this bearing situated. Unfortunately, it falls like in the middle of these two ribs right here. So I'm gonna cut on the plasma table a nice plate to be able to bolt the plate to this guy, and then we'll mark our holes for the bearing that we can bolt the bearing to that plate. It's gonna be a pretty substantially thick plate. Probably gonna do 6 bolts just because I like to be overkill with stuff like this. All right, so our bearing's in place. As you can see, it's held up by the floor jack here. We use these Cleco clamps to hold the plate up. So we'll have 6 bolts holding the plate to the frame, and these 2 bolts for the actual bearing. So we're gonna mark the holes right now, drill these up. We're gonna drill our 6 holes in the frame, bolt the whole assembly in. The drive shaft is in. We have our bearing plate all bolted up. As you can see, we have our grade 8 bolts that are bolting this 1/4-inch plate to the cab of the truck. And then we have these 2 1/2-inch grade 8s that are gonna hold this carrier bearing. Everything is set. Now we can focus our attention to the coolant system at the front of the truck and get our overflow tank hooked up. This is our overflow tank we fabbed up here in-house. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna make some brackets to be able to reutilize this bolt for the radiator. And then we're gonna use 2 1032 bolts going through the core support here. Andrew's gonna go ahead and drill a hole on the front side of the radiator cap. We're gonna tap it, then we're gonna run a hard line out the front of the radiator. It's gonna kind of run down here, jog down. From here, it'll be a soft line. It'll go under this overflow tank. You wanna make sure you're at the lowest point so it'll be able to siphon coolant when it needs it and then expel it when it doesn't. All right, so we got our charge pipe that we're installing right now. The only thing I had to do was drill a little hole in the top of this flange. And this flange actually covers the filter where it kind of bolts on the other side. And so what we wanted to do is get some fresh air from outside of the truck. So our K&N air filter, we got this little stubby guy, it's really nice. So it's gonna bolt on with a traditional worm clamp, and then we have this nice stainless Allen screw that's gonna come through this side and just hold it steady on the flange. We don't need like a ton of hardware to hold this in place. Just one bolt should do the trick. And then we're gonna put 2 worm clamps up there on the Whipple supercharger. All right, so the ultimate icing on the cake is about to happen, guys. We're getting rid of these nasty plastic Coyote valve covers. Mikey likes cake. These are billet valve covers. These are handmade by JC Customs locally here in South Florida. These things are gonna freshen up this engine bay and take it to a whole nother level. We have our driver's side all prepped. If you ever order a set of these from JC, I would suggest getting new O-rings. You can get them from Ford, no problem. These old ones that are usually in the plastic are really hard and brittle. Do it. Show us how to install your own product, man.
Yes, you lads like this right here. And then we're gonna do this.
Slide right in there, right there, right there.
Man, I might need some nut butter on this one.
There it
we
is.
go.
There it is. You got lucky.
Woo!
Man, you got lucky, son.
I like butter. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's like factory. Man.
Factory OEM fit and finish, you know what I'm
So
saying?
we just put the rusty screws back in there?
Yeah, just put the really rusty one.
I'm not quite.
Now, did you make these from scratch?
Yeah, these are billet hold downs. And they stand off so you don't over tighten it with the gasket.
Oh, okay.
So
So
they
it's
stick
just,
out the bottom like 50 thousandths.
it'll just stop.
Yeah, see how that sticks out a little bit right there?
Oh, you thought about everything, man.
That's right.
Man, it's like freaking NASA in here. Put this right
Break the bolt before you break the valve.
there. Ooh, wow.
Boom.
That is snazzy.
You like it? Can you dig it?
Man, I can dig that.
All right, Tim just put the valve covers onto the F100, and me and Mike are gonna get it out of the clean room and onto the lift. These aren't the permanent wheels. Still waiting on a set of Vossens, but we're getting these on here so we can roll it back into the main fab room, get it up on the lift, and finalize the bed and the heat exchanger. Tim's gonna fab up the exhaust. Some work pushing that thing.
What's up?
It's up here.
Oh, cool. You guys finally got this thing on the lift.
No thanks to you, Tim.
Oh, come on now. Next episode, the real action is going to happen, guys, because we're finishing up the full exhaust on this thing and throwing the heat exchanger under the bed. We're also going to be finishing out the brakes and a little bit of wiring here and there. But the ultimate goal is to get it on the rollers and get it down the road. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you guys next time.
Shine me up.